Okay, so we're going to start book club. And before we do begin, I read the section, and I actually talked to Adam because he plays a lot of magic users, whereas I play a lot of frontline fighters because I like to feel very badass.
Yeah,
so I'm trying to understand all the magic stuff. But he plays both a wizard and a sorcerer in 2 different campaigns. And I was wondering what everyone in the chat thought about whether they would prefer to play a wizard or play a sorcerer. So I started a poll. So if you do exclamation point SOR, that's a vote for sorcerer, or exclamation point WIZ is a vote for the wizard. And if you guys are inclined to, I'd also be curious to read why you would prefer to be one or the other. So because I know one has innate magic and the other you have to learn your magic. And I know one's more versatile.
Formulae, right? This is the idea. They use formula to actually tap into the Zyanthuus, right? It's sort of almost mathematical, right? That is the idea behind it. The sorcerers, it is just within them for some reason that people do not even understand.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the idea.
Okay, so yes, we are on page 21.
Yes, and 21 has the little overview on it, right? It says the Zyanthuus magic in Zyathé. The magic of Zyathé is named the Zyanthuus, which is also called the Everflow. It is the Zyanthuus that keeps the Eterniverse whirling in the void space, makes each of the planar realms possible, and causes all matter in the Sulion system, including the life world, to exist. The tapping of the Zyanthuus is what makes all magic feasible. The Zyanthuus was the inception of all that Avova made. It was the first of his creations after he spoke the way of all things, which is the unbreakable law that made possible all that was formed thereafter. The energy of the Zyanthuus flows through every particle of the Eterniverse and infuses all the planes that make up the realms of the gods. Nothing can exist without it. It is also slowly destroying the entirety of creation. Yes, that is magnificent, yes? So in this section, this is where we sort of give an overview. Now, of course, Magicka is just about to drop, right? And Magicka goes so much more deeply into all of this that is contained within here. But it is important to understand as we ponder, as you look through the book, right? It first talks about the castes of magic. There are 8 of them because we follow the 5th edition sort of SRD, right? Because it's part of the game. Now, there may be a time in our future where a few more castes come to be. We will see as time progresses and the world goes forward here in the real world as well as the world of Zyathé. But right now, there are the 8 castes, right? Oh, thank you, Cameraman. And they are right there. Yes, you actually, if you want to show this, you can do that. So you can read about each one of them. They are not dissimilar to the 5th edition materials, right? So Cameraman, this is the thing here, right?
Yes.
So the Zyanthuus used to have 12 levels, right? This is what we call in the game. Levels.
No, the 13th level was only for Avova.
There is a 13th level. Right, if you want to call it that, right? This is the way of all things, right? There's only one spell, right? And some originally thought when Galcianthros literally destroyed the world and broke magic and all of that stuff with this terrible thing, that he actually was trying to cast the way of all things. And indeed, that is what he was trying to cast. That's what he believed he was trying to cast. But in reality, it was a very powerful 12th level spell called the Unmaking. But this had been disguised from him, so he did not know, right? And so this is the whole tension that we have created with the magic of the Zyanthuus, right? Is that there were 12 levels that were accessible by the gods and by those in the mortal realms who have the capabilities to do so, right? There were 12, but after the Woe of Ruin and all of the things that happened and the nether flow creeped back in and the crystal barrier was broken and all of this stuff that we talked about in past discussions of the book club, the 10th, 11th, and 12th cycles are no longer accessible. Some believe they are fully destroyed. Some believe that they are still accessible. Zoldothran Vildreen being one of them. Yes, Zoldothran. Yes, you and me. One of these days. Yes. Anyway, that is a whole nother topic. But anyway, so as you're thinking about magic, right? The idea, the wonderful thing that we did with Zyathé and magic was we made it this interesting thing that is not just good, it's also bad. And not just because bad people twist it to their purposes, it's innately bad, as well as innately good. And this was sort of the underpinning concept of magic in the first place in the world of Zyathé and in the planar realms, right? So when you're pondering magic, right, when you're thinking about it, right, you have to remember that the Zyanthuus, which was originally a singular flow, right, a singular river, if you want to think of it that way, right, a singular dispersion in the aftermath of the Woe of Ruin. To save the Zyanthuus, the gods Evoke, Infiorni, and Sha'ada went into the halls of the making and literally separated the flows into three. This was the idea that they had to stop what was going on. And so by separating them into three, they also reduced their power, the ability to, it's harder now to cast magic, to use magic, right? It's more difficult. It is more unpredictable. There are all kinds of things that happened as a result of that, right? And so in this separation, now if you want to cast a spell, you don't just tap the Everflow. You actually literally have to pull from each one of the three component flows, which again is part of the idea that it makes it more difficult. This is also complicated by the fourth flow. And the fourth flow is not the substra flow. I know that some of you are thinking about that, because this is another flow I'll talk about in a moment. The fourth flow is the nether flow. And the underpinnings of the nether flow was that these marvelous and terrifying lords of corruption that appeared in the beginning, which we talked about in the Ventinium Alanax and Pass, they created this flow. And it was an inverse flow. It actually went to the maker and began to siphon off some of the maker's power, which is how the lords of corruption gained so much of their powers, because they actually stole it from the maker. Now that flow still exists, and it is dispersed as well. And when Avoval sacrificed himself to go into and merged his essence with the Zyanthuus, he also created the crystal barrier around the nether flow to stop it from seeping into the rest of the Zyanthuus. But now there are cracks in that crystal barrier. And that nether flow is slowly seeping into the world, into everything, into the Zyanthuus. And that is the wonderful thing that we have done with magic that I'm so excited about, to see it pan out with higher level characters, to see what happens over time as we look at the second book of magic, all of this kind of stuff, right?
We have some good.
Oh yeah, let's answer questions.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I hope everyone, you enjoying this? Everyone liking this? Please let if it's getting boring, you give a thumbs down or something like that. So.
No, I think it's great. But Belinda wants to know: does everyone in Zyathé understand that this is slowly destroying their world?
So this is a discussion that I've actually had about this exact topic. So magic is viewed with superstition. So this is another thing that brings tension to your game. Now, in the larger cities and the more cosmopolitan areas that are more accustomed to seeing these works and doing these things, there is not the same levels of sort of fear, right? But you go out to some of the more outlying areas, and in certain places, literally wizards, sorcerers, those kinds of folks could be viewed with significant mistrust. And it makes it great for you, right? When you're running games for your players, it makes it great for your players because they never know what they're walking into when they walk into a village, all of this kind of stuff. But so the average person probably does not know that their world is doomed. They probably do not know this. But those who have ears to hear, if you will, right? The people who are in the governments, the people who are in the higher ups of the wizardry guilds and those kinds of things. Those folks all do know, and there is great concern. And there are groups that are trying to figure out how to fix this problem, and they are unsure, what to do. And of course, there are powers working against them, right? Those who serve the lords of corruption who are trying to further it. They want it faster. And so this is, again, more dynamic tension that makes it so marvelous. So the common person might just view magic with mistrust. But it is important a distinction of this, because in a lot of those small villages, alchemists are probably not viewed typically with the same level of mistrust, because alchemy is more perceived as medicinal, if you will, right? Not magical, right? Even though it is. And certainly the clerical magics, the the godly magics are not viewed with mistrust at all. In fact, when you have the power to heal people, even if you are a relatively low-level, priest out there in some podunk town, right? And someone brings their little child to you and you save them, that tends to make you quite popular, right? So the holy magics, the godly magics, these are not viewed with the same look as sort of the sorceress and wizardly kind of things, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually have a question about that. Because you say here in the book, the only notable I read the wrong sentence. Nearly every living creature, and even some unliving ones, seem to possess magical inclinations at some level due to the constant flow of energies being supplied by the central everflow. So it's viewed with mistrust, but it seems like most people might have the opportunity to harness it.
So this is the concept, right? The concept is that the Zyanthuus flows through everything. So whether or not you show sorceress talents, right, which are sort of this ability to go boom, right, and bring magic out just innately, right? The ability to use formula, probably most people, if they have enough intelligence, enough diligence, enough effort, right, even if they are not sorceress, right, which is in the innate magical abilities, right, they probably could, in some measure, be able to harness spells in some ways. Yes, this is the idea. It is not something that you are necessarily just born with the talent or not. Certainly for wizardry stuff, it's about learning. It's about study, it's about effort, and some people might have more aptitude, if that makes sense. But the belief is that pretty much everyone should be able to in some way harness magic. And that is certainly the truth in the times of the Eterns. Virtually everyone who was part of the civilization was trained up in magical skills, right? They had all their colleges, all their schools, all of those things, right? And so magic was ridiculously common in the Eternic times. So, make sense?
Yeah. So we kind of got to wrap up the book club discussion for today because we got to talk with wonderful Stacy.
Yes.
But I do really quickly.
Was there any quick questions that we wanted to answer real fast?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the results of the poll that I did at the beginning.
Okay.
So it's honestly very evenly split. Sorcerer got 53% of the vote and Wy'rd got 47%. And there were some really insightful comments in the chat. One from Grognik said, love the idea of the sorcerer, but wizards can use scrolls to learn and scribe new spells as they adventure, which allows them to be more versatile in a way. However, Harry countered that point, saying, I prefer the sorcerer as I struggle with preparing all of the different options a wizard presents and the need to make decisions each day. And that was something Adam definitely struggled with. Was our GM had never run, he was very experienced GM, but he had never run a wizard before. And so he kept giving Adam spell books. And then Adam was like, I have too many spells at this point. I cannot, it's almost overwhelming how many options I have. Oh, Adam's here. Do you want to say something about that?
I mean, if you're gonna talk about
you can come speak into the microphone.
Too many.
It is a lot, but at the same time, I liked having the flexibility, but it was overwhelming trying to figure out, all right, I have 57 different spells. Where am I going here? Hello.
Okay, go ahead.
No, but I had 57 different spells I had to pick from every day. And then you also tend to get locked into some required ones. If you're a wizard and you don't have counterspell, you're playing wizard wrong.
Yeah, you should.
If you don't have fireball, you're probably also playing wizard wrong. Mm-hmm. So.
Also, in the new Magicka, if you don't have Zythic flojectiles, you're playing the wizard wrong. Don't take magic missiles anymore. Never again. Yes. Anyway, no, that is the truth, right? And honestly, when I'm game mastering, I actually really am very judicious about the distribution of spells. I want the wizards to actually really be excited when they get that kind of thing. So I tend to be a little more careful about giving too much stuff out, and that also helps, of course, with exactly what Harry was referring to. I tend to play wizards more than I play sorcerers, but when I play. But I think, honestly, I prefer the wizards for exactly the reason Adam's saying, is there's a little more versatility and flexibility, but it is kind of a pain in the butt. And also, that's another thing, just a real quick GM tip, and then we're going to talk to Stacy. Yes. So if you just give out crap all the time, right? First of all, it tends to make it a lot tougher on you as a game master to run sort of balanced games. Stacy and I could even discuss this a little bit, right? It's nice to be generous with your players, and you want to be generous with your players. But ponder as you're doling out stuff, right? Who's not getting things, who is getting things, right? You know, sort of how do you balance that a little bit? How do you maybe put together something where they have to get this, and then get this, and then get this, and then get this to put something together to make something really special? You know, the rod of 7 parts idea, that kind of idea. And this actually is additive to the game. If you're just giving folks so much stuff all the time, getting things it's not special anymore. So this is something to recall. All right, so as we do the book club next week, we will talk about flow stones.
So basically last week, what we talked about was kind of just the introduction to it, to
the magic section, right? Yeah. The streams of the Zyanthuus.
Indeed. And today I thought we could talk a little bit about, I read up to like flow stones, and flow stones are super interesting, but I thought we could talk a bit about Sarth today.
Yeah, sure. We can do that.
And how, because there's a lot of mention in this section about how the Sarth actually cannot like wield magic or use magic. So they're the only people who can actually handle flow stones.
That's correct. But let's talk about flow stones first, because if there are people out there who aren't so familiar with it, it's harder to explain that unless we get flow stones first,
yeah, let's get a little bit into flow stones, and then we can.
Yes. So as you progress through the tome, the initial part talks about how magic works, right? This is the streams of the Zyanthuus and the casts of magic. Now, I want to tell you, it is quite possible that in our future, there may be more casts of magic. This depends on how things progress and things that we do, and do we maybe look at an ancillary system type of thing that sort of augments 5e? I don't know. There's a lot of things that we're talking about that we're very excited about, but this is longer term plans. But right now, we followed exactly as 5e does with the 8, what they called 8 magical spheres, or whatever we call them, casts. And abjuration, conjuration, divination, enchantment, evocation, illusion, necromancy, and transmutation. So that talks about those things. And the Zyanthuus is actually in 3 streams now. It was done that way to save it during the time of the Woe of Ruin, whereas it used to be in a single stream. Okay, so that's important. If you haven't read that yet, you go back to the beginnings part where it talks about the historical account of the Wy'rded world. All right, so to get magic to work, you have to tap the Zyanthuus. And that basically happens for arcanists, those are magists, 2 ways. One, it is innate to them, like a sorcerer, right? So a sorcerer, they're able to pull the Zyanthuus into themselves and then cast it out, right? That's the idea. For wizardly types, they actually use formulae, right? Magical formulae that they memorize that enables them to pull the Zyanthuus, right, and shape it, right, to tap into it, shape it, and then cast it forth. So it's a distinction that is important, because the difference between sorcerers and wizardly types, right? The third way that the Zyanthuus is tapped, right, is through a god, right, a patron, right, which doesn't always have to be a god, by the way. This is how these warlocks work. These warlocks, yeah, warlocks. So yes, so flow stones are called the Izin Zythunea, okay? Izin Zythunea. This is the medical term, right? The scientific term. And they are called flow stones in the vernacular. And flow stones appear to have been formed after the War of Ruin. And they are gems, for lack of a better term, that contain magic. And they are toxic, very, very dangerous. A wonderful thing for you to bring in, right? If your characters happen to encounter a place where there's a raw vein somewhere, and they're rare, by the way, keep that in your mind, they're rare. And they are toxic. They can do all kinds of terrible things to you.
Yeah, there's a whole chart of terrible things.
And this is a little chart in here. Wait till you see all that's going on in Magicka when you look at this. But if the flow stone can be cut precisely in certain methods, right, using certain special techniques, it can then be used as an augmentation. So like you could put it into armor, it could increase your armor class, for example. Or it could be used to put into a staff where it stores a couple of spells that can be cast from it, or all manner of things, because it's basically this very chaotic substance that was somehow created in the Woe of Ruin, and no one really knows how or why. So flow stones, the interesting thing about flow stones and the Sarth, and this is very important, is that for some reason, I know the reason,
Okay.
but for some reason, the Sarth are insensate to arcane magic, and they are also relatively insensate to the effects of toxic flow stones, which means they are better able to be miners of these substances. They are better able, in fact, they are the only ones who can actually cut the flow stones and be able to do so and make them usable by others. So this is what gave rise to flow staves, to flow staffs, which the Sarth use in place of wizardry and sorcery, and gave rise to fusils, which are these magical firearms, for lack of a better term, and all of that revolves around flow stones, including, of course, technic machinations, right? So the Sarth have sort of a monopoly on this cutting of flow stones. And so this massive Sarth kingdom, for back of sovereignty, for lack of a better term. There's much more about it, but let's just use that for the time being. Down in Zustrenia is very wealthy and very powerful. And they don't like it when other places try to get Sarth to work for them, if that makes sense. And so they are not always so nice when Sarth go to work for others and cut flow stones and do that kind of thing. In fact, I would say it is one of the most dangerous occupations for anyone, right, in the world of Zyathé, to be a rogue Sarth flowstone cutter.
I'm like sitting with my mouth open, like listening to this, because this is super interesting. Where is this written at?
So a lot of this is in Magicka, and you're starting to get to it. Some of it is spoken to in the Sarth, right? But we have not got, again, goodness gracious, cameraman, it's impossible to put it all out there, right? This is the tale, right? So this is the whole thing. So Zustrenia will deal with most of this, all this aspects of the Sarth.
Yeah, I
right?
like this a lot. And just from the base, from what I got, because I skipped forward to the Sarth section in the book, because I was curious about why it was that they could, why they couldn't channel magic. And it said something about a curse. They didn't go into too many details. And so it sounds like, though, that you have a tale.
You want me to tell it a little bit of the tale? I
am kind of curious, yes.
So there are 4 races that, when they were being created, were blessed, for lack of a better term, by the 4 elemental sovereigns. The sovereign of water, the sovereign of fire, the sovereign of earth, and the sovereign of air. The Aether are the air people. The Maroon are the water people. The Garund, cameraman is taking notes.
No, I'm typing.
The Garund are the earth people. And the Sarth were the fire people. But in the tale, just at the last, for some reason, the fire sovereign withdrew the blessing. And this goes back to much that happened in that time and all kinds of things that went on. And as we will learn when we come to Sundestia, there is a true fire race, but it is not the Sarth. And some believe, like me, because I've read a lot about this, yes, because I am Alphinius Goo after all, yes, I read a lot, yes, this is what I do, yes. And I play with goos, but that's a different thing. All right, so many believe, who have studied the subject intently, that it was actually this withdrawing of the blessing at the last moment, just as the creation was happening, that caused this arcane conundrum, this dichotomy, this strange happening that caused the Sarth to not be able to channel the Zyanthuus. And that is magnificent, I think. Anyway, that is the tale that is going on. So when you go in through here, you can read about what can happen when you use flow stones improperly, how the Sarth cut them and all of that stuff. But that is the tale. How'd I do, cameraman?
Awesome. So
you got a few questions before we hang up?
I'm asking anyone. I was just literally typing. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yes.
So
quick questions, and then we'll get out of here and let you all have a wonderful rest of
I have
your
a question
Saturday.
myself.
Yes,
okay.
ask.
So in the very beginning of this, it has like a beautiful picture of a half Sarth, and it says this half Sarth can wield magic.
Absolutely, she's wielding magic.
And
That's
so,
absolutely correct.
does that mean that she would not be able to cut
Correct.
flow stones?
She cannot. She has the same limitations as all the other peoples on the face of Zyathé. That is why when we learn more about the Soth people and Zustrenia and their whole sovereignty that's going on down there and all of that stuff, you will learn that they have bloodline tracings, that they are literally tracking the bloodlines and making absolutely sure that certain Sarth of skill, because there's more to just it than any Sarth can go become a flowstone cutter. There's more than that. There's more to it. And we'll explain more about that when we dig into that future. But they literally track the bloodlines. They're watching all of these things as part of their structure. But there's something happening. This is another marvelous tale. You can write this down, Cameraman D.
Okay.
Something is happening in the bloodlines now. For these, because the sort of this inbreeding thing that is going on, and so we have a lot of tales
I
to
see.
tell.
So because they're trying to keep their bloodlines pure, there's okay.
and not just pure, but sort of within the
I'm sorry,
sphere of
and
these.
that is an incorrect term. I'm sure that I probably.
Oh goodness, people
Yeah,
understand.
okay,
They know you aren't
yeah.
being, they know you aren't being supremacist. or anything
Everyone
like
knows that I'm not a mudblood person. I love it. So anyway, but yeah, because they're attempting this thing, they're
trying to keep
that is
it.
super
They're trying to
interesting.
keep right. They're trying to keep it all sort of in this very because there's skill involved with cutting flowstones, but there's also the less you are susceptible to the toxicity, because Soth can still be susceptible to the toxicity, just not at the same kind of levels. We'll write about this again in the future as well. But there's a number of factors that come into play that can make a more skilled, a better Sarth flowstone cutter. All right. And so there's all these factors that come into play. Now, that doesn't mean that out of the blue from, someone who's never had a Sarth flowstone cutter in their family, and even though they are pure of Sarth blood, how about that, Cameraman? They are pure of Sarth blood. That doesn't mean that suddenly someone who has these innate skills and abilities that sort of come to them don't happen, right? And this is actually where some of the rogue cutters come from that are being protected by governments around the world. And even still, sometimes they get the, right? Yes, because the Soth want to keep their monopoly. They're kind of the De Beers.
This is a really interesting. I love this whole interesting. I mean, I feel like there's so much that you could play with here. I feel like if you played a half Sarth, I feel like you could dig so deep into rejection from some of your relatives. There's a lot of amazing role playing opportunities that comes with a backstory like this.
Yes, our plan is to stratify the society, the Sarthic society, somewhat, and that again because of the conflict, right? This is the idea, right? That these things are real, right? They live in our real world, unfortunately. That's the sad thing. But in a world of adventure, right, you want people who are doing bad things because you want your heroes to be able to overcome the people who are doing bad things, right? That's the idea. So the Sarth, there are people in Sarth society unequivocally who look down upon those who are not of pure blood, right? And there are others in Sarth society who think this is bull. This is terrible. We need to change our society, right? So we have this marvelous conflict between those who are kind of not really on the right side of thinking, right?
Yeah.
This is not really good, right? And then we have these others who are sort of kind of trying to change it for the better, right? And that's the marvelousness of the conflict that'll happen when we dig into Zustrenia a little deeper in the future.
Okay, I have some questions from the chat.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, I like this from Josh. What is the difference between Sarth and the High Elves? Because they're both trying to keep their bloodlines quote unquote pure, oftentimes. And so, is there really a difference, or is it all kind of that whole supremacist mentality?
So the Sarth do not have. There are more Sarth all over the world and stuff like that who are definitely do not subscribe to this sort of De Beers monopoly kind of thing that's going on in Zustrenia. So the High Elves are different because their population is so small, and they literally and they have a grudge, right? The High Elves blame the humans for the woe of ruin. The High Elves have real big difficulty with dwarven folk. They're very, I would call them xenophobic, okay? The Sarth are not really so xenophobic. They don't really look down upon other races as much as they look down upon Sarth who are not of pure blood. If you're sort of in the not the good guy, the club. How about that? We call it. Does that make sense, Campbell
Yeah.
Andy? So
I mean, there is also like another element to the Sarth in that if they lose their bloodlines, they lose the ability to work with the flow stones.
That's
And
right.
so there is, I could, in a way, I'm not saying it's justifiable. I'm just saying there is that extra element of they're trying to protect.
They're trying to protect their economic viability. Yeah. That's exactly right. So the High Elves really are a very xenophobic society in general. Now, again, I want to tell you this. Zyathé is not like this. There are people in the Avorta Malou, High Elves, who hate what's going on in the Avorta Malou. And they are some of them persecuted. Some of them are trying to change this whole attitude that High Elves have, that High Elves of the Avorta Malou have. Because there are High Elves all over the world that don't subscribe to it at all. They've been kicked out of the Avorta Malou. There's all kinds of stuff. This is not endemic to any individual group of people. It is endemic to certain cultures of people. And that's very important to understand that distinction, right? For a host of reasons, right? For gameplay and also for realism, and also because we just don't want to be like that. That's not something we want to be like. So the Sarth Society is really much more, Josh, it's a great question, by the way. The Sarth Society is really around economic advantage. That's why they are what they are and why they act the way they act. Versus the High Elves are really about trying to sustain their people and trying to figure out how, in some ways, some of them, how to regain High Elf supremacy, which they believe is important. Though that group in the Avorta Malou.
Alexander had a good question. What about those with the blood touch? Are they pure?
So you can be. The blood touch is not a DNA thing, if you want to use our world terms, right? It is a factor that still is poorly understood. And the problem with the blood touch, again, I've said this before, for those who have the eyes to see, yes, for those who are reading and looking and actually digging in, the blood touch existed before the War of Ruin, without question. And some wonder why. Why did it come into play? What does it mean, right? And that's the idea. So you could absolutely be a pure-blooded Sarth, right? Pure-blooded, again, in the sense of not diluted with any other blood, right? They've been Sarth their whole lives. That's all the people they have mated with in their lives, in their generations. So you can be that, and yes, you can still be blood touch.
And
absolutely.
Can you cast?
And a great question, Alexander.
Yeah, and he's following it up with, can they cast arcane magic?
No, not if they are blood touched. They cannot. There is no ability that will give any Sarth of pure blood the ability to channel arcane magic. Nothing. So they can have a blood touch, but that blood touch, even if it had some, they wouldn't have a blood touch that would give them the ability to cast arcane magic, because whatever's going on with them, and it is not something just physical, y'all. This is very interesting thing that goes back to perhaps even deeper secrets that are yet to be revealed.
Okay, so last week we discussed this. We started discussing flowstones, but then we especially discussed Sarth.
Yes.
And their
and why the creation of why they're insensitive to arcane magic and how that happened and all that stuff. But we're going to get a little more into flowstones directly right now.
And I'm excited about this because this is one of the okay. So like when we talk to people at conventions, and we like start going into like deep lore. This is the stuff that I think most people are really intrigued by in terms of how we use flowstones for magic.
Yes, I think this, corruption magics, the things that make the world relatively unique versus, right, this fusiliers versus just having black powder firearms, that kind of stuff. So this is page 30, and this is where we begin talking about flowstones. Flowstones are creations of the Woe of Ruin. These are magical gems that were formed during the Cataclysm, and each one carries some semblance of magical imbuement. Though most are fairly impotent in terms of their power, more rare varieties of flowstones can embody substantial Zyanthusic energies. Harnessing those energies, however, can only be done by those who have mastered the ability to cut the flowstones with facets that allow the magics within them to be used without serious and potential deadly consequences. All right, so this is what you must understand about flowstones and why we created them this way. First and foremost, most of the flowstones that are found are so flawed that they cannot be really used to make usable flowstone gems, right? These cut in facets. So that's very important that you remember that. Secondly, well, maybe I should back up. So flow stones are this somehow creation, right? And there's, again, this is the tales of Zyathé that underpin the whole thing, right? So we have this wonderful creation. They didn't exist. Then we have the God's War and all the things that happened in Avova, right? Emerging with the Zyanthuus, entrapping the four lords of corruption in the Never Place and all of this stuff. And then we have the Woe of Ruin, which is when Zyanthuus casts this horrific 12th level spell, not 12th level casting, what we call casts, right? Casts this 12th level spell called the Unmaking. In fairness to Zyanthuus, he was deceived, but it doesn't matter. It was a terrible, horrible thing that he did in any case, causing the Woe of Ruin, causing the collapse of the high magics, causing all of the corruption that is in the world as the Netherflow seeped into the Everflow, all of this stuff that happened, right? And of course, somehow, in this cataclysm, these marvelous, interesting power gems of power, crystalline structures that imbued with magic, appeared. But there is much more to the tale than we have even written yet, I promise. So anyway, so these gems are created, and interestingly, over time, over the first few hundred years, the Sarth realize that they are not affected if they are of pure blood, if they have not had another race intermingle in their ancestry. If they are of pure blood, they are not affected by the toxicity of these flowstones. And so they begin to wonder and experiment to figure out if there's a way that they can be used. And lo and behold, they figure it out. And thus the beginning is the flowcasters. So because the Sarth were for many, many, many centuries, quite a number of centuries, they were not many, 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 but quite a number of centuries, they were diminished because they were if they were of pure blood, they couldn't use arcane magic at all. They could have blessing of spells bestowed upon them, like clerics and holy warriors and those kinds of things, right? But they could not channel the Zyanthuus either through formulae, as magists do, or through natural things like sorcery, all right? So flow casting got them back on a level playing field. That was the idea, right? And so they would make these flow staves, and they would channel the Zyanthuus through those flow staves using the flow stones that were embodied therein, and thus flowcasters were born. So the flow stones are very, very important in Zyathic lore. And really have many, as I mentioned earlier, many more tales to tell. Did you have a question, Camera Mandy, or the questions in the chat real quick?
No, I think we're all just listening. I mean, I have lots of comments, but I'm curious. You keep going, and then I'll say some
yes, and if you have a question, do pop it in there. Camera Mandy will interrupt you. We'll go.
Oh, here's Belinda just came with a comment, which I have not read.
Belinda, she's going to be one of the bards of Zyathica. Yes?
Yeah, and Belinda has been one of the biggest advocates for this book club, and we appreciate you, Belinda.
Yes, thank you, Belinda.
Okay, so flow sickness, vile mind, mutus. Do we have anything that goes over these illnesses and the differences of symptoms?
Yes.
Like what makes them different from one another, and why are there different kinds?
Magica goes into this much more deeply than what is in the Cyclopaedia Zyathica Volume 1. The Wy'rded world, right? So Magica has a whole section that goes much deeper into flowstones. So if you have that yet, Belinda, check it out. You would only have the digital copy, obviously, at this point, because we still haven't published. But we are working on getting them printed. We're just going to make these last typographical changes that need to be adjusted, right? And then we're going to the print. One of the reasons why we released it digitally ahead of time, and we're probably going to do this with everything we do going forward, is just because some people, they get into it, they want to read it, they check it out, and they find something, and we can fix it before we actually go to a printed process.
You know what I find really funny? Magica is spelled differently in this book than it is in.
I know, but that was a decision. That was a decision that we made afterwards, that we really wanted it to be Magicka, not Magica. So it is okay. It is,
At one point, we'll reprint the books with the correct thing, and then all of your books that have it wrong
collectible
are going to be collectible in 4 40 years.
Yes, far after I have become dust. Yes, ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
You
yes.
got another 40 years in you.
I hope so. Yeah,
Okay.
I certainly hope at least another decade or so, decade and a half, that we can work with all of these marvelous people on continuing this path.
You got so morbid there for a second.
So, no, it's not morbid.
You're going to be working well into your 90s.
Well,
just
we will
relax.
see. Listen, so there are 4, right? Okay, so this is important. There are 8 types of flowstones, and you can see this on page 30.
Oh, wrong page.
There are the clear or white ones, which are called alabastrine, and they are associated with abjuration magics. There are the red, which is refrescent, which are associated with evocation magics. There are the yellow, which are associated with Zyanthuus, which are associated with divination. Blue, which is cerulean, enchantment. Orange, Taitian, which is transmutation. Purple, which is heliotrope, which is necromancy. Green, Verdian, which is conjuration, and pink, roseate, which is illusion. So those are basically the 4 basic types. Now, on top
This is
of
my
that,
this is my new way of doing graphics, so I don't have time to pull them ahead of time.
yes, look at you marking up your book.
Well, yes. Well, this. It's, I know it's sacrilege, but whatever.
Now, it's important. On the next page,
Yeah.
on 31, there are also 4. This is kind of freaky. There are 4.
Oh, and Linda points out that there's actually like a graphic of the
Oh, yes, there it is. That's exactly right. That is actually on page 34 if you want to look at that.
39.
34. Or you got the...
Oh, wait. I'm on. Yeah, it is on page 34.
Yeah, 34.
Okay.
So you can look at the graphic there, and also you'll learn. So let's do this real quick. So this in 32 they talk about the annihilation stone, which is AJ and I had a discussion about this, about being crazy. Artramentos, which is annihilation. The sludge brown, which is Pasios, which is chaos. The ash gray, which is Cenariel, which is Nuul, right? And then the rotten pale yellow green, which is Chlorus, which is the warp. And these are stones that are out there, and they are very unusual. And there is even one more. The nether stone, which is sort of a combination of all of these things, which is not even mentioned here. These will be dealt with more deeply in the next round of Magicka, which we were originally going to talk about Corruptica, but there's so many other things we want to put in there that we didn't put into Magicka 1 that we want to put into Magicka 2. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, as you progress through chapter 31 and 32, you will learn about flowstone damage from cutting or striking by a non-Sarth. And then as you continue on in the book, then you read about the magic of flowstones. You'll understand that there are actually there are combination flowstones, prismatic and chromatic stones that combine multiple attributes of the 8. And it's really magnificent. And we may actually, as we progress with the magical thing, there's some things that yours truly wants to bring to magic in Zyathé, and it may progress beyond the 8 casts. We'll see what happens as we continue down the path. So that there may be the discovery of other flowstone colors. We'll see how that goes.
So I'm actually kind of curious to ask our audience: has anyone had a player get very deep into flowstones in terms of even? I'd be very curious to hear personal stories of how they use flowstones. I like, as I was reading flowstones, there's in this chart on table 2-1, flowstone damage from cutting or striking by non-Sarth. So I was interested to see if any player would actually take the risk of cutting their own stone, given how it can damage your character and even their potential to do magic in the future. Like, is it really worth the risk, or would they find an NPC character? Would they find a Sarth to cut it? And I was just curious to see if anyone's actually done that.
So if anybody's done that, or other observations about flowstones, right? Because your thoughts help us, right, as we continue down the path, right, of all of this stuff. But this is just barely scratches the surface of flowstones, Cameramandi. There's so many wonderful things in Magicka that are going to just astound you. I think it is really delves much more deeply, gets more into them, helps you understand how the creation of flow cores happened and what flow cores are and why they're 2 different types, right? How fusels evolved, and fusels are just magnificent. I love the idea of gunslinging spell slingers, right? This whole idea, right? So their firearms don't shoot projectile weapons, they shoot magic, right? So this is really very cool, and everyone can use a fusel, but only fusiliers can really take advantage of their their extra powers, right? But if you wanted to choose to be a warrior that instead of carrying a bow or a crossbow or a sling or a shot or whatever, right, you could carry a fusel, right, and use that as your missile weapon. And so this was the idea that we could do that. It's just the Fusiliers get the extra bonus, right? But of course, flowstones gave rise to all of these things, gave rise to fusels, gave rise to technic machinations and how they're powered and all of that stuff. And all of this is outlined in Magicka much more deeply than here.
Well, I have a comment from Asticnarn.
Yes.
My Fusilier had a lot of questions, but shied away from doing anything with them based on the lore. They're mostly interested in getting them supplied as they continue through the campaign.
Yes.
And I will say, like, as someone, I don't do a lot of magic users myself, but this is something that my husband, Adam, would like totally sink his teeth into. Because it takes kind of that, I feel like it kind of takes an analytical mind to...
Well, and also the part of the challenge, right, of playing any kind of a magical using class, especially one that utilizes any kind of material components, right, is the replenishment, right? This is part of the adventure, right? And so what happens is you find a fusel core, right, and you're a fusilier, and you're so excited because you actually found something that augments, right? Or you find you're not a fusilier, you're just a warrior out there, and you happen upon a flowstone that actually augments your armor, right? And you can actually embed it in your armor, and it actually gives additional powers to your armor. So this is what's really, really exciting about flowstones is they add this other dynamic. We still have enchanting in the world of Zyathé, and enchantments work, right? But you can even augment enchanted items with flowstones. So this is magnificent, right? It's just wonderful.
To follow up on that, though, Asicnarn says we actually aren't sure how rare flowstone cores ought to be.
Whatever you want for your table. So I really want to say this. This is a thing that is just the truth of the game, and it goes down to level balancing and all of this kind of stuff. And if you've ever been with me at a convention and we actually had a more extensive conversation, or if you've hung around with me enough, or if you've probably watched a lot of these shows, I might have said this before, there is simply no way to really balance a party of 3 inexperienced players who are in a low magic campaign with a party of 6 experienced players who are in a relatively high magic campaign, and say they're all 3rd level. There's no way to balance at 3rd level, because those experienced players who have a lot of magic are going to chew through encounters like crazy.
One thing I wrote above, where you said that some gems may not be perfect, or may not, they only may have a certain amount of spells in them.
Yes.
I said it would be really interesting for like a lower level character to get a faulty weapon that like could do incredible damage if they roll correctly, or it could
go against them.
Yeah, exactly. And like that might be like a really fun thing. Like if your character can't afford like the best fusel in the campaign, but they still want to try something, like getting a fusel that has a core that's a little bit faulty might be something really interesting for them to sink their teeth into.
Yes. Now, Astrogarn, I'm going to finish answering your question.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right?
Pam says like Ron Weasley's broken wand.
I want to tell you this, my friends. It's a game master. The rules are guidelines. The things that are in the book are guidelines. Your job, and I keep saying this, your job is really to not have your party wipe. Your job is to make a challenging and wonderful adventure for them that hopefully doesn't wipe them. Because if you look at statistics, over time, every party will wipe. If you're playing it RAW, every party will wipe with statistics over time. There's no way not to. You're in the casino, the players have only one character. They have only a certain defined number of hit points. And so your job is to bring them a wonderful and satisfying and kind of scary at times. And you know what? Sometimes that means a character is going to die, and you need to be okay with that, right? And if the players are playing right, this can be a very moving and wonderful time, right? Especially if they're going to attach to that character. There's other things you can do if they do die to maybe bring them back in the future. We had a wonderful character named Gurg the Strong who literally sacrificed himself to save the rest of the party, and he did completely. And also Mike did the same, right? I told you about that story. And these can be wonderful parts of the overall tale that you're telling with your players, right? And so what I encourage you to do is to not be bound by necessarily sort of this is the way it is, right? In my adventure, fusel cores are going to be relatively rare at the higher levels. At the lower levels, right, they're being made by the Sarth. The Sarth want to make money. They want to sell them, right, that kind of stuff. So it's not going to be impossible for a first or second level fusilier to get a decent core that's going to work in their fusel so that they aren't running around not being able to engage, right? Because this is the idea. If you can buy arrows everywhere, you should be able to at least be able to buy lower level cores, right, to be able to do that. So now you start getting up there. You start getting some of these special cores that are noted in Magicka. You wait, yes? That might be a little difficult, right? That might even be a quest to get something like that. So this is the way I would play it. But others, right, they want to be more, loot gifting, like Larry, right? Larry's been really, really interested in doing that. And I feel like I'm not super tight. I'm a little tight. But I've actually met game masters who are far more tight than I am, right? I sort of strike that middle ground. I like rewarding players, but I don't want them to get overly looted so that really when they find something special, it is special. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
On page 33, we begin to talk about flowstones. We began to talk about them last time. And the important, oh, thank you, Cameraman. That's great. So on page 33, and you actually see the 8 different types, and I explained those last time, and then we stopped. I believe was kind of where I stopped in that regard. And there are more than these 8, right? There are combination stones that are called prismatic and chromatic stones that actually combine properties, and also there are some other stones like nether stones, which are stones of corruption. And many people have asked, where did these come from, right? And flow stones appeared after the Woe of Ruin, as near as any can see. And in areas, typically, they are more concentrated, where more corrupted things happened, right? So it's speculated that the continent of Crooks has probably the largest repository of these things. But of course, going to Crooks is incredibly dangerous, and most who go there in any kind of an excursion, right, don't come back. And so people tend to avoid trying to mine flowstones in the area of Crooks. But flowstones offer these wonderful things for you to be able to do, when you're playing and in your adventures, because they can augment capabilities of magical items. They can, in their own way, make items magical themselves. Of course, as you will read in Magicka, their dust is used in certain ways to be able to make cores that are power, right? That actually create power, create energy. And they really, really are a wonderful and unique thing to the world of Zyathe and make them special. And as you all know, they're also quite toxic. So this is the lore of the Sarth and the fire sovereign withdrawing the blessing, and the Sarth and ending up being a people who are insensitive to arcane magic, and hence the only ones, if they are of pure blood, able to actually cut the flowstones without being totally destroyed by the terrible emanations that come off of them. So it's a wonderful lore. And so when you get a chance to read this, it explains this. But really, I want to tell you, this
is me showing the damage chart. Hey, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Government.
Okay.
And any questions from the chat, too.
Yes.
I can pause for a moment to give a chance for folks
I did
to
mention
throw
that,
those up.
yeah. Okay, so obviously different types of flowstones have more power or less power depending.
Yes.
Can anyone of any level wield like a flowstone?
No, there are limitations as part of the rules, obviously, because we don't want it to get out of control, right? Everything we try to balance, right, to make it appropriate. And all of this is very is defined in here in the Cyclopaedia Zyathica Volume 1, right? But it's very, very well covered in Magicka, and we spent a lot of time with this. Our team spent a lot of time with this, and we feel pretty good about balancing it and how it works. And in here, you only see the basic flowstones, right? So you see what are called the lesser flowstones, the chart that is on page 33, that talks about the lesser flowstones. But in the Magicka book, you actually see lesser, and then the more intermediate, and then the greater, right? And then they talk about prismatic and chromatic, and flowstones basically it's the three things that determine them, their capabilities and powers, right? First of all, the color is very important, because depending on the color, that is the type of powers that it puts off associated with the casts of magic. But the size of the stone in terms of carat weight, the purity of the stone in terms of flaws, and the cut of the stone based on the skill of the cutter, all of these come into play a little bit in terms of flow stones. But this is all well documented in Magicka, and I think, again, for your players to have something fun and unique and interesting to play around with, and for you to be able to play around with it as a game master, I think flow stones bring much to the table for you.
Okay, I have questions.
Absolutely, let's go.
Okay, so Scepter Flow, Elemenus.
The Elemenus.
Elemenus.
Yes.
Sorry. It's called a component part of the 3 flows. Can you describe what that means?
So this is one of the mysteries that is not well understood in the world of Zyathé. So if you remember, when we read the chronicles of the Ventanu Malanax, in the beginning, Avova spoke, right? First, Avova dreamed, right? And then spoke the way of all things, right? Which is the thing that causes all creation. And at that time, Avova infused into the void the 4 elements and the Zyanthuus, thus creating the beginning of all things. Well, the elemental sovereigns are mysterious. Some believe that Avova created them. It is not mentioned, though. Some believe that they have always been as Avova, but in their own rights enigmatic and not really engaged. Some believe that all of this is not true and that they are actually an aspect of Avova, not even separate from Avova. And this gives rise to the beliefs of the worshippers who say that Avova will return because of the elemental sovereigns and other things that are going on in the world of Zyathé. But all this wonderful mystery is part of the greatness and the fun of the adventure that we are doing with our players, right? So the substra flow has never been identified. It is only theorized. It is believed that it infuses within the Zyanthuus, but there are others who say it does not exist. However, most of the true scholars of magic in the world of Zyathé do believe that the substra flow is part and parcel to the entire Zyanthuus, and it infuses each of the 3 flows, and indeed also infuses the nether flow. So this is the wonderful thing that is going on with that. I hope I answered it well enough, because the truth of the matter is we kind of want to leave it a little mysterious for a while right now. This is sort of a, because part of the adventure for a game master is also the telling of the tale, right? The gaining of the tale. And we're going to continue to develop the world of Zyathé together as we go forward in the future. And by not necessarily defining it all right now perfectly, and rather leaving things a little more enigmatic, it gives us room to tell more tales in the future, if that makes sense. So if your players are wondering, this is a perfectly acceptable explanation that people are not sure. Even the most learned of scholars, right? How's that, Cameraman D?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I can't believe how much you have in your head.
Oh, yes. A lot of things in my head, yes.
Yes,
marbles being one of them, yes.
Okay, can flowstones explode when damaged?
So flowstones may not be. This is actually addressed in the materials. Flowstones cannot really be used as projectile type weapons, right? But if they are struck strongly enough, and this requires significant. You don't just throw it on the ground and it pops like a fire popper, firecracker, right? That kind of thing.
But wouldn't that be cool with these lesser ones?
Just throw them down on the ground and just boom. Yeah, but it would be
smoke bomb.
It would be very toxic smoke.
Oh, that's fair. Good point.
We got to be careful with
just
these
use actual smoke bombs for that. I'm just kidding.
Yes, and we have
prestidigitation.
Those. Yes, we have smoke bombs. Right?
I love it. Okay.
But anyway, so they are not. We had to be careful because we didn't want them, because we know players are ingenious, right? And they come up with all kinds of ideas. And we didn't want flowstones to be able to be taken and just, shot at others, right? Causing explosions and damage and all of that kind of stuff. So in the Cyclopaedia Magicka here, we do a pretty good job of defining that, but even more in the Cyclopaedia, Zyathica, Volume 1, we do a pretty good job, but in Cyclopaedia Magicka, we do a much more extensive explanation of those kinds of things. So the short answer is no, they are not designed to be able to do that.
Okay. I like this question, and I like the response that I think it's Adam gave back. Okay, the question is, can you eat flowstones? And the response back was, you can eat anything once. Yeah, that is exactly the truth. Now there are some that believe that the Inzandra Oz actually consume flowstones in certain ways, right? So this is another mystery. Belhaka? Carrie's in the chat.
Halko.
The Hako. Okay. Yeah, Carrie's in the chat answering questions.
Nice,
yeah.
Carrie. Excellent job. Well done. You're helping me out a little bit. Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. There's been a lot of chat since
It's okay. I'm glad that people like this, and I love this kind of lore, right? Is special, right? And the more you bring it into the tale, the more it makes the world feel real. The more it makes things feel interesting, right, for your players. Because, honestly, and not to disparage anyone out there, but to say, congratulations, you have achieved the second level, right? Is better than just level up. Right, it is. It's better than level up, right? So have a flair for the dramatic as you're doing your game mastering. Don't be afraid to bring that to the table. Some people are intimidated. Don't be intimidated.
Yeah,
be crazy. Yes.
Agreed. Be charismatic. Be Alphinius Goo.
Be gooey. Yes.
Okay.
That was really weird, cameraman. You sound like Kiki Hoodie. Alphinius Goo.
Okay. I don't think that I do not think that we condone the inhaling of flowstone dust.
No, and it wouldn't be good for you anyway. This is not like a recreational drug. Let us be clear.
This is me just going through the chat.
I
I'm
am
trying to
snorting flowstone dust.
Okay, if I missed any questions, please repost them because I was trying to get caught up. Okay, so talk to us about. So you wanted to go more into corruption magic.
So yes, I want to do that, and then we'll do alchemy and alchemy.
Sounds good.
So the wonderful thing also about Zyathé is that we have established a very interesting pantheon. And first of all, to understand, it is probably not like a game you're familiar with that you play in if you play in the more traditional TTRPGs. Mm-hmm. A cleric definitely typically serves a single church, right? So they are sponsored by a church, okay? But in that sphere of that church, there are a number of what you might call more favored gods that kind of tend to work together and be together. They have their own factions in godhood, and those are not necessarily always defined simply by the alignment of the god. So, and this translates down into the human populations and the elven populations, the dwarf, all the rest of them, right? Because they have patrons that are really sort of their favored group of gods. So the Hanatas have those, Haliona, right? Jinx, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's like 7 of them. And Kismia, of course, Chans. These are all part of their sort of their major group, right? That is their favored group. But all people believe in all the gods. And even if you are a lawful good person, if you found out that you had an assassin coming after you, you might actually go give a gift to slay, a tithe to slay, to turn the assassin's blade. So this is what you have to understand, is this is the idea of the pantheon, and I'm getting a little off course, but it is very important when you understand that, because this is what we're trying to do with the world of Zyathe. And so as we think about the churches and we think about the pantheon and we think about all of that stuff, we wanted to have things that countered to the gods as well in the creation of Zyathe. Thus gave rise to the lords of corruption, and thus gave rise to the loss, the passing of Avova, and thus gave rise to flowstones. All of these things, as the tale began telling, it began growing, right? It began like a marvelous, beautiful rose bush, right? Of beautiful blooms and all of these things coming off of it, right? And then we even came to the point of this 9, right? And the thing is about the 9, right? When you read this, and you know what? I'm going to read something, cameraman. Is it okay? Yeah. It's not too long, right? So this is from the inside front cover of this book. The sickness seeps like a dead man's blood to foul the riven land. Ne'er shall be cleansed evermore corruption's taloned hand. The races play their foolish games, not hearing death knells toll. They know not that of what they do, while evil kills the soul. The taint spreads in the farthest depths to weaken all therein. The stone doth weep its woeful cry, such filled with living sin. The flow still festers, noxious runs, a lie is purified. Cracks doth mark the Never's walls to free those trapped inside. Whence comes the end of all things made? Will any stand and fight? When darkest dreams doth come to all, shall come the fearful night. The horns shall sound with no retort, destroying one and all. When the abomination finds the sight, then comes on Maker's call. But there remains in outcast words a secret in a rhyme. What shall then be in fortune's hand, come horror's bleakest time?
I think that we need to record this for TikTok.
The vision of them by the prophet Boudinot. And the thing is that this is the idea, right? So the corruption lords are trying to return, right? There are individuals and perhaps even heavenly powers, or excuse me, not heavenly, but godly powers that are trying to aid them. Perhaps there are others that stand against them. But then there is another thing happening, which is that this nine that are spoken of in prophecy that are said to be trying to return right now at the time of the red stars rising. And so this all comes to bring all of this tale together and have it all begin to make in some ways, fantastical sense, to give us all this wonderful texture to keep building the world of Zyathé in the years to come. And that's what I am incredibly excited, because you are helping tell the tale.
You know,
right? This is what's so good. Yeah.
I will say, like, I feel in chapter 4, you kind of start getting more into some of this stuff from the history of.
Indeed.
And having even just started reading a lot of this as a player, I was like overjoyed when some of the little nuggets started coming into play in the actual campaign. And I got to be like the one at the table being like, I have details about this. GM, am I allowed to divulge? You know, like, is it too meta? You know,
it's
or
not
can I?
People have knowledge.
If they have
of the
lore,
world,
and
right?
exactly, and like I like, you know, he had me roll for what I did know, and so I was allowed to tell half the tale.
Nice.
So yeah. Anyway,
excellent job, Larry.
Yeah. No, I really though love the idea though that like you can build out like, I mean, obviously the Red Star Rising campaign is pretty popular and people love playing that, and you can play this stuff in there. But then you can also build out your own campaign based in the world. Either campaign. I mean, I think that there's so much depth in either one that your players are going to be very intrigued.
Oh, yes. And I am excited to see the tale advance, right? Who are the 9? When do they come back? Are they really coming back? Is it all a lie, right? All of these kinds of things. Is Avovar really dead? Is Avovar passed? Is Avovar really in the still remaining in the elemental sovereigns, right? Is all of these things, are the corruption lords going to be able to break out? Right, these are wonderful tales and fearful tales. These are nightmare tales, right? When it happen at night. So anyway, so let's talk about alchemy and narcomy. Okay, so one of the things that we really wanted to have in the world of Zyathé, because there's actually a third practice which we've kind of brought forward now, which is necralchemy, right? Which is the creation of sort of potions and potables that deal with undeath, right? And this is sort of sprung out of all of the things that happened in the Vile Desolation and all of the things that happened. In fact, there's some thought that it really didn't exist before the War of Ruin. That necralchemy didn't really exist. But I don't know about that. There's still a tale in the telling. So Kerry might want to weigh in on that, and Alexander might want to weigh in if he's watching. But alchemy and narcomy are basically the two practices of creating potions and potables. Alchemy tends to deal with stuff that's more beneficial. Narcomy tends to be with stuff that's not so beneficial, right? And so if you're an alchemist, you probably make mind-altering things and things that could be more addictive. You probably engage in the creation of poisons and certain things like that. And if you are an alchemist, you tend to more deal with things that are more positive, not so dangerous. And we wanted to be able to split those things up, because we thought it would be more fun for players to kind of pick and choose. And also, because certain things are probably pretty bad. If you're going to go out and make things that get people addicted so that they give you their last dime and do whatever they need to get their next fix, right? That's probably not a very nice thing to do. So we kind of wanted to split up the disciplines. So we do have alchemists and narcomists, and these things are coming as we continue to build forward. But you can read a lot about brewing of potions, oils, and powders on page 36 and 37.
I have a question from Belinda.
Oh, yes, please, Belinda. Absolutely.
Okay. Are there alchemy and narcomy guilds or groups that pass along knowledge to one another?
Yes, undoubtedly. Yes. In fact, the power structures in the world of Zyathé really, in most countries, basically are three-pronged. So there is the government, of course, and the military that goes along with that and all of that stuff. Although sometimes, the military can be a little fragmented from the actual government itself, right? Creating almost a fourth prong, if you will.
Wait, hold on one second. So wait, in what realm are we talking about, like with the military?
In many realms, in many realms. So
we're talking
the
like more
Republic of Zyranthia, right?
Okay.
It could be down in Anvala, right? So the government could be a sovereign government that is more elected, right? Sort of more democratic in its structure. It could be more a kingdom, queendom, sovereignty kind of thing where it's really an inherited sort of thing like Anvala is, right? It could be sort of a number of mixtures of those kinds of things. Volandia is a great example of a dictatorship where basically one, the Zoldathran Vildrine, who calls himself the deity incarnate, same with Kalnavik in the Vile Desolation, right? These are sort of dictatorships, and then there are all manner of forms of different kinds of governments depending on how they're structured.
Right.
But so you have the government, whatever that is, right? Whether it be sort of democratic or tyrannical or sort of maybe inherited by birthright, sort of old-fashioned sovereignty kind of thing. And then you have the guilds, right? And guilds are powerful, and they want to be powerful. That's part of the idea of joining them all together, right? So they join together, and some guilds work together very, very well. Some guilds are opposed to each other, right? So this, again, creates more factioning and interest when you're running things in a city and in areas where there are high population densities. And then there are the churches. So we really pushed hard to make the churches much more than just a place where you go and get healed, right? This is a big deal for us. We believe that the church, you have the power of life and death, which these churches have. You have immeasurable power. And it is unrealistic, fantastically unrealistic to assume that a church would not exert that power no matter how good they are or no matter how evil they are. They're going to do their best to influence things. They're going to work with politicians. They're going to try to tell the king or the queen, hey, do this, right? They're going to try to even influence the dictator when they can, right? This is the idea, right? So this creates all this political intrigue and all this marvelousness, right? So in virtually all of the sovereignties and the governmental places, right? The places, the territories that are actually overseen by a true government, you're going to find all three of those. And there absolutely are alchemy and narcomy guilds, although the narcomy guilds got to be a little more careful, right? Because in many places they are outlaws and they are doing things that are really damaging to the people of the community, whatever that community is, right? Selling people stuff that's highly addictive, and we really want to come out with a supplement in the next year or so that details poisons and details narcomies. Because we think that'd be a lot of fun. But this is, one of the 57 things that are all on the list that we want to do next, right? So can't do them all, but that's one that I've already got a very significant list of things that I created over the years. And there's others, AJ's got a bunch of ideas and lots of people have ideas. I've had, Jim has sent us stuff and said, why don't you think about this, and others have sent us stuff. And so it'd be a fun supplement because I prefer at my games to have a little more depth of if you're poisoned, it's not just you get in the poison condition, there's other things that go along with it, and I like to bring those to the table. So anyway, I got a little off topic, but other questions, Camera-Mendy?
Brandy has a good comment. Perhaps there's a secret guild of narcomists operating within the catacombs dark citadel of Malithuk.
Well, why
And the High Minister
not?
is desperately seeking to root this out.
Well, why not?
I mean, like, these are great.
It's not finished yet, is it, Sir Randy?
Send these. Okay.
Is Pamela around today?
I have not seen her.
I don't. She's been traveling. She's sent some marvelous pictures. She's been to some wonderful places, so. But we miss you, Pam, if you aren't around. But Pam has done a yeoman's work trying to help us with the Gloomport and keeping things organized there, along with our wonderful lead writers and our groups. And I'm really excited to see it starting to come to this place where we're going to really start diving into it here soon.
Absolutely.
So magnificent. And of course, Jen's has been so instrumental in helping us with Darkenhaven, along with probably 30 or so other people who really have done wonderful things to make Darkenhaven special too. So, and all of you are going to get, if you really put out the effort, you're going to get this wonderful poster series. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to have a wonderful value if you were going to buy it, and it'll be very special because there won't be many of them in the world. So we're excited to reward our people well for their efforts.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and finish up because it's 11:03.
All right.
So is there any other thoughts you have on magic? So
for me, to kind of cap this off, right? I would love for all of you, assuming you, and again, no pressure, but thank you for your help when you do so. But I'd love for all of you to get Magicka. I think it's the first real supplement book that we did. It's for players, it's for game masters. It has all these wonderful spells, all this wonderful lore about the world of Zyathé and magists who are in the world, and the background on how the universe, the Eterniverse is what we call it, actually works. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. There's all kinds of new classes and archetypes, but the reason why I want you to get it is because I think our take on magic is fantastic. And I think that even if you're not playing in the world of Zyathe, you might look at this and think, wow, this could apply in my home game, even in the world that I'm running, because we really tried to think it through and have it make fantastical sense. And thanks to all of you who gave us comments on the digital copies, we held off until we got those comments, and we have made most of them, fixed most of them, and now we're getting ready to actually go to physical print on that. So that is the next thing that we will be doing with that is getting those bound up and printed and start shipping those out to people. And Cameron Andy, it's amazing, right? It's hard to believe, November of 2 years ago, we started this crazy Kickstarter thing, and here we are, getting close to done. Still a few months away, not a couple, maybe 3 months away, but maybe 3.5 months away, but we're getting really, really close. So, yeah. My friends, that's what I got, Cameron Mendy. Was there anything else I was supposed to cover today?
No, I think that we finished the Zyanthuus, and next time we will be talking about cosmology and the counting of time and days.
Yeah, so this will be fun because I really, and I wish James could watch. He's in England, so he typically doesn't get to watch with us. But I really like kind of keeping days and keeping count of those things and how the phases of the moons of Zyathe and these various things that go on, because it's interesting, right? It is interesting for your players. These little nuances help bring the world to life. So, and the cosmology and counting of days includes sort of a current clock, which has all kinds of interesting details of things that have happened over the last year. And there's just a lot of good stuff in there for you to be able to review.
Yeah, I'm excited to get kind of a breakdown of this, because this is, I will be honest, as a player, this is kind of stuff that sometimes overwhelms me in terms of trying to get into the details. So having like a nice breakdown of like how it could be simplified will be super helpful.
Yes. And the calendar, of course, got kind of screwed up because of the woe of ruin, right?
Yeah.
So this is all kind of goofy, right? But we did that on purpose, not to make it more complicated, and the creation of Sovereign Days, not to make it more complicated, but just to make it more interesting. So if your game master's kind of on it, then you should be able to be on it, and you just have to spend a little time looking at it and thinking about it and understanding why the number of numbers pan out the way they do and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking ahead, and I already like some of the things that I'm seeing here. Special day.
Yeah,
Stalking day.
Yeah, we did a lot of
a
lot of holidays. We'll have those in there so people can enjoy those, right? Because they go to a city and they're having a celebration. In fact, there was a wonderful post. Gosh darn it, we should have put that up, Cameron Meddy, in the Gooey Den about this city where pigeons are revered, right? They're beloved. It's against the law to harm them. Everybody feeds them.
That was a good
and they
post.
poop everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean to foreigners who don't really understand their culture coming there and the place has pigeon poop all over the place, right? Or is there a special guild whose job is to clean up the pigeon poop all the time? Right?
All the time.
So yes, right. So you start thinking about how do you bring these interesting cultures, because that changes the face and feeling of a location when you arrive there.